The EU, or European Union, is a unique political and economic union between 27 European countries. For over 50 years, the EU has delivered economic prosperity, peace and stability, helped raise living standards for EU citizens, and launched a single European currency, the euro. However, many European Union citizens have a lot of questions about how the EU works, especially young people.
What exactly is a political and economic union?
An economic union is an agreement between member states to allow goods, services, money, and workers to move over borders freely. A political union involves member states working together on important policies and political issues in areas such as environment, health, climate, and justice.
Who came up with the idea of the EU, and why?
The seeds for the European Union were sown way back in 1950. This was only 5 years after the end of the Second World War. And European countries such as France and Germany, that had fought bitterly against each other, were still suffering the after effects of the social, financial, and political devastation it had caused. There was a determination to preserve peace between European countries and prevent another terrible war. On the 9th of May 1950, French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman came up with a unique proposal that European countries come together and pool the production of coal and steel. He wanted to create one big market between countries for selling and buying these two vital materials that were essential resources needed to run a successful economy. Monsieur Schumann's basic idea was that countries that trade with each other would be more likely to work together politically and less likely to wage war with one another. The idea worked, and a year later in 1951, 6 countries, Belgium, Germany, France, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, came together to create the European Coal and Steel Community. The 9th of May is now celebrated as Europe Day across the EU in honour of Robert Schuman, who could be seen as the founding father of the European Union.
So how then did the European Coal and Steel Community become the EU?
The next major step forward towards forming the European Union came in 1957 with the signing of a very important agreement, the Treaty of Rome. The original 6 member countries of the European Coal and Steel Community decided that working together worked well, and they wanted to do this in other areas too. And so was born the European Economic Community, with one of its core aims being the creation of a common market for goods and services.
What is the common market for goods and services, and why was this such a big step forward?
The new common market meant citizens and businesses in each of the 6 countries could now trade freely with each other across borders without any extra cost. So if you lived in France and you wanted to buy a car from Germany, you could do so without paying an extra tariff to bring the car across the border into France and vice versa.
When did Ireland and all the current members join? And when exactly did the EEC become the EU?
Ireland joined the EEC in 1973 along with Denmark and the United Kingdom. Greece joined in 1981, Spain and Portugal in 1986. Then in 1993, with the Treaty of Maastricht, the EEC changed its name and the European Union was officially created. In 1995, EU membership increased when Austria, Finland and Sweden joined. However, it was 2004 that saw the EU membership grow substantially. 10 new countries joined, including 8 newly founded Eastern European democratic states that had previously been under communist rule. In 2007, Bulgaria and Romania joined the EU, and in 2013, Croatia joined. As the United Kingdom left the EU in January 2020, there are now 27 member states with a total population of nearly 450 million citizens.
Has there been any wars between member states in the EU?
Since the creation of the EU, there has been no wars between member countries, an outstanding achievement that was recognised when the EU won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2012. From peaceful beginnings, the EU has evolved into one of the most unique and democratic bodies in the world. Ireland and Irish politicians have been at the heart of the European community since 1973. And the impact of EU membership on our nation has been more beneficial than anyone could have imagined. However, joining the EU was a long process for Ireland. A lot of conditions had to be met. In fact, Irish politicians had spent the previous 10 years trying unsuccessfully to join.
So why was it so important for Ireland to become a member? And why did we fight so hard to gain membership?
The 1950s and 60s were difficult times for Ireland with much unemployment and immigration. Agriculture was a big industry, but most of our exports were to the UK, and our economy relied heavily on this. Our politicians understood that joining the EEC would give us access to a wider and more competitive European market and lessen Ireland's economic dependence on the UK. Following a referendum in which 83% of voters were in favour, we joined the EEC in 1973.
So it's been really good for the Irish export industry, and that is good news for our economy. However, how has EU membership helped ordinary Irish people?
One of the biggest benefits of being an EU citizen is the freedom to travel freely to live, holiday, study or work in any European Union country. This freedom of movement means Irish citizens can greatly increase their job prospects, improve their language skills and experience other cultures. The Erasmus Plus programme gives Irish students and apprentices the invaluable opportunity to study or do a work placement in another EU country. It also allows teachers, youth workers and volunteers to gain professional experience abroad.
So, if I want to travel to other member states, can I use the same euro that I use here in Ireland to buy things?
Most countries that are part of the European Union use the same currency. This currency is called a euro, and it can be used to pay for goods and services when travelling in any one of the 19 countries in the Eurozone. This makes it much easier for Irish people to compare prices when travelling. It's also because of the EU that mobile phone roaming charges have been abolished, and that air travel is cheaper, safer, and open to more people than ever before. Should you become unwell whilst travelling within the EU, the free European health insurance card helps you access medical care, so don't leave home without it.
How does the EU help with Irish consumers when they want to buy goods or services from another EU country?
One of the EU's greatest achievements is the single market. It treats the EU as one shopping territory without any internal borders between EU countries and a few neighbour countries when it comes to the free movement of most goods and services. In fact, thanks to the single market, Irish consumers can now buy goods and order services right across the EU, and their purchases are protected under EU consumer law.
I believe in equal rights for all. What has the EU done to improve the rights of Irish women?
The EU is the driving force behind laws that have improved equal treatment between women and men when applying for a job and when at work. EU law also protects the rights of pregnant workers, breastfeeding mothers, and the rights to maternity and paternal leave. The EU believes in equal rights for all and protects people against discrimination in the workplace based on sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, and belief.
How has the European Union helped the Irish language?
The European Union uses the motto, "United in diversity." So even though people in the EU may have different languages or cultures, the EU protects the right of people to use their own language. And so the Irish language has been recognised as an official language of the European Union.
And what about day-to-day life? Has being in the EU made it easier to live in Ireland?
EU support and funding has had a hugely positive effect on the development of Ireland. It has been used to transform Ireland's infrastructure, from roads to rail links to ports. EU funding has helped Irish farmers and rural Ireland. It has financed training and employment programmes, as well as provide support for disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. It has helped to promote peace and reconciliation in Northern Ireland and the border regions, and stood by Ireland throughout the Brexit negotiation. The EU has helped to fund everything from tourist attractions to town centres to local projects that have helped save or rejuvenate communities across the country.
Joining the EU has done a lot for Ireland in the past, but Ireland faces future challenges due to Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic. How will the EU help?
The COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge impact globally, but the EU is determined that the future for Irish and other European students remains bright. Education and training is set to benefit hugely from the EU's massive €750 billion COVID Recovery Fund, designed to help member states face and deal with all the different challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic has created. In the battle against coronavirus, the EU worked hard to accelerate the research and development of safe and effective vaccines. And the €5 billion Brexit Adjustment Reserve is set to help countries like Ireland who will be financially affected because of Brexit.
I live in the countryside and farming is very important to my community. What will the EU do to help Irish farmers?
The EU is fully committed to protecting the environment, ensuring a safe and secure food supply, and supporting farmers. The aim of the Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, is to improve food quality and animal welfare standards, whilst also keeping Irish farmers competitive in a rapidly changing industry by helping them expand their farms, upgrade equipment, and access training. Fishing has always been important to our island nation, and the EU's Common Fisheries Policy will continue to help support the interests of Irish fishermen, fishing communities, and consumers.
I care very much about nature and the effects of global warming on the world and Ireland. What is the EU doing about the climate emergency?
Climate change is the biggest challenge facing this and future generations, and the EU is at the forefront of the battle to tackle it. EU laws have already brought about great improvements in Ireland in areas such as waste management and air quality. For example, the EU law which allowed for the recycling of electronic and electrical appliances has seen thousands of items going into managed Irish recycling systems instead of ending up in landfill sites. The European Green Deal will see the Union become a world leader on climate change by committing to make the EU the world's first carbon-neutral continent by 2050. This means achieving net zero emissions for EU countries as a whole, mainly by cutting emissions, investing in green and sustainable technologies and jobs, and protecting the natural environment.
Growing up, all I've ever known is a digital world. But a lot of people older than me are still getting used to a tech world. What is the EU doing to speed up that change?
A new digital economy is rising. The Digital European Programme 2021 to 2027 is the very first ever funding programme solely dedicated to supporting digital transformation in the EU. €8.2 billion will be spent in areas such as supercomputing, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and in helping every company, small or large, high-tech or not, to take advantage of digital opportunities and so in turn make life easier, better and faster for EU citizens and businesses.
How does the EU impact on the rest of the world?
With its digital programme and Green Deal, the EU is leading the way in dealing ambitiously with two of the biggest challenges that the global community faces. The EU is proud to be the world's biggest donor of overseas development aid to poorer, more vulnerable countries. And, as a result of the EU being a global economic superpower in worldwide trade affairs, Irish exporters and consumers benefit hugely. By being a member of the European Union, Ireland has a bigger say in big issues that affect both the EU and global community.
So how exactly does the EU work?
Each of the 27 member countries of the European Union remains an independent self-governing state. However, in certain areas, member states delegate or hand over some of their decision-making powers to shared EU institutions they have created.
So, if EU member states make important decisions about certain things, how do they do it? And where do they do it from?
Three key institutions in EU decision-making are the European Commission, the Council of the European Union, and the European Parliament.
The European Commission, based in Brussels, is responsible for the day-to-day running of the EU. It is responsible for proposing policies and new laws, and this is decided upon by a college of 27 commissioners, one from each member state. The European Parliament approves the President of the Commission. The current President of the Commission is Ursula von der Leyen, who is from Germany, and the term of office is 5 years, both for the President and for the College of Commissioners.
What responsibilities do individual commissioners have, and whose views do they represent?
Commissioners do not represent their countries. Instead, they have a portfolio of areas of responsibility given to them by the Commission President.
In my case, that's everything to do with the financial system, the stock market, financial stability. But I'm also dealing with new things like digital innovation in the financial area, and very importantly, how we can get money invested in the green recovery. And I think that's a hugely important issue. I'm from Ireland, but at the college I represent all of Europe, not just Ireland.
How does a commissioner decide which new laws to propose?
So essentially the College of Commissioners draft legislation or indeed change existing legislation, but we don't do it on our own. We listen to stakeholders, those who have an interest in that policy area, and sometimes we ask people to give us their views of what's coming up.
How can ordinary people have a say into proposed or existing EU laws?
Citizens, businesses and organisations can get involved in Europe's future direction by sharing their views on new EU laws or on how to improve existing laws via a public consultations process on the Commission website.
You can log on and give your views on specific issues that are open for public consultations. And a very important public consultation underway at the moment is the Conference on the Future of Europe. We really would welcome young people's views as to how the European Union should look in the future.
And how does a policy proposal become an actual EU law?
Once a policy proposal is approved by the 27 commissioners, it then moves forward to the Council of the European Union and to the European Parliament, and both those European institutions then decide whether it will become a law or not.
The Council of the European Union is made up of government ministers from the different EU countries, and depending on the policy proposal, you will see the relevant ministers attending. The European Parliament is made up of 705 members from the 27 EU member states.
How often are members of the European Parliament elected?
MEPs are directly elected by EU voters every 5 years to promote the interests of the 450 million citizens.
The allocation of MEP seats is based purely on population size, and the more the country grows, the more possibility they'll be able to add MEPs. In Ireland, we have 13 in total. Once a month, we vote in what we call plenary, so voting sessions, and they are done in Strasbourg in France. The other 3 weeks of the month, we have meetings in Brussels in Belgium.
Does the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union always agree on new laws?
When the Council and the Parliament don't agree on legislation, which is actually quite a lot, we have to meet up and agree a compromise before a new law is enacted. Negotiations begin, each side outlining the important issues for them, and it's about concentrating on the issues that unite us rather than divide us.
Once a law is adopted, it is the role of the European Commission to ensure that it is properly applied in all member states.
What role does our Taoiseach have in the European Union?
The Taoiseach and other EU member states leaders all form part of what is known as the European Council. It holds regular summit meetings during the year to discuss the overall political direction of the EU. You could say they meet to discuss the big picture.
Okay, I'm beginning to understand how it all works, but are there any more EU institutions?
Other important EU institutions include the European Central Bank, the main bank of the 19 Eurozone countries. The European Court of Justice ensures all EU laws are applied correctly, and the European Court of Auditors oversees the proper management of EU money.
All of the EU institutions exist to ensure that the European Union operates in an open, democratic and transparent way, and that citizens' interests and rights are protected.
What about working for the EU? Are there many opportunities for young people?
Each year, around 1,900 young EU graduates are offered the chance to apply to take part in one of the EU trainee programmes. Opportunities are available in a variety of EU institutions and in a wide range of fields, including competition law, human resources, environmental policy, communication, and many more.
These are periods of time where you get your foot in the door. You get a sense of what the EU does, how it works, and you'll get a sense of what kind of job you would like to do within the EU institutions as well.
I'm based in Brussels. My job involves all sorts of communication. My speciality is social media, so I get to research what works and what doesn't work on social media. So I started as a trainee in the communication unit. Traineeships are important because you need people to explain things to you. It's also important for making friends and meeting people who are at the same stage of life that you're at the same stage of career that you're at.
To find out more, visit epso.europa.eu/job opportunities/traineeships.
Aside from traineeships, what other long-term career prospects does the European Union offer?
The EU institutions employ over 40,000 people, mainly in the European Union, but also in locations all around the world.
There are so many different career options within the EU institutions. Anything from being a lawyer to being an accountant, working on human resources. For any EU civil servant, we all have to have 2 EU languages when we start off. But to stay within the EU institutions, you'd need to have 3 EU languages at your disposal. I would, for example, have started off with I had Irish, English, I have French, and I brought German with me as well. One of the very interesting jobs that are available to people with languages is the job of being an interpreter.
Working as an EU interpreter here in Brussels is a really exciting job. You're right at the centre of the action and all the debate that goes on within the European Union, and you really do get an opportunity to see history in the making. Here in the European institutions, for example, politicians, citizens and officials can speak any one of the EU's 24 official languages. Interpreters translate a message from one language to another, aloud and in real time, so that everybody can understand and follow what's being said. I interpret from French, German and Irish into English.
You've also got a range of administrative jobs, and that can be anything from making sure that policies are put together and are implemented, to helping the politicians communicate their policies as well.
I'm a communications manager at Eurofound, located in Dublin, and our role is to provide knowledge and information to EU policymakers and national governments and social partners to help them shape better policies for citizens, whether it's gender issues, industrial relations, employment, and bigger issues like climate change. I work in a multicultural environment. I work with people from lots of different countries, and it's great to be part of the European project, but at the same time, as an Irish person, I get to live in Ireland.
Diversity is also one of the reasons that I love working in the European Commission. You get people from all over Europe, but also all over the world, and you're never short of an interesting conversation.
So if I had any advice for young people, I'd say brush up on your languages. As an Irish person, native English speaker, you have a huge advantage. But if you can arm yourself with French, with Spanish, or another language, I think so many more doors will be open to you.
On the 1st of January 2022, Irish will become a full official working language of the EU institutions. We need translators, we need interpreters, we need proofreaders, and we need lawyer linguists. If you'd like to work for the EU institutions in the future, take a look at our website, euireland.ie. We have a page there, Work for the EU, which gives you a sense of the different career opportunities available and the places where you could find information.
As a young person who wants to find out even more about the EU and get involved, what can I do?
There are many dynamic and interesting ways young Irish people can get involved, including online and in-person participation. For almost 50 years, Ireland has been an active and valued member of the EU. We have benefited hugely from our involvement, and we've contributed to its success. For this generation and generations to come, Ireland's future is a European future.
I'm proud to be a member of the EU family.
It's a very big family.
There are 450 million of us in 27 member countries.
And as an EU citizen, I can travel freely to any of these countries.
I can shop without any extra tariff or cost.
For goods and services from any one of the member states.
And thanks to EU laws, both me
and me have the right to equal pay for equal work.
And every EU citizen can work freely
in any one of the 27 member countries.
To find out more, follow the European Commission representation in Ireland on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.